Since it's already an episode number 6, I think it's time to properly introduce ourselves. Hi, my name is Gleb, and you're watching Bands and Buckles. This is a series called Time Journal, a series that documents our journey into the watch world and watch collecting through what I like to call it shower thoughts, small videos on slightly random topics. So if you like it, please hit the like button and subscribe because there's plenty more to come. Now, dear journal, someone in the comments just recently asked a great question, so thanks for that. And the question is, should we consider buying a vintage timepiece as a part of a budget collection? Well, that's a simple question on the surface. There are millions of details to it. Especially given the fact that vintage watches vary from one another. What counts as a budget collection is also a question. And most importantly, should you even build a collection if you're on a tight budget? To answer those plainly, yes, you can use vintage watches to build your budget collection, 100%. There are just a few things you need to take into consideration. Vintage watches are very interesting things. Even though a lot of the designs can feel repetitive and not that creative or inspiring or quite plain, really, there's something about even those the plainest of the models. That old Seamaster just has something to it. You can't just simply look away from it. But vintage watches aren't limited to Omegas, and you can find some absolutely amazing designs like Universal Genève, for example, the Polyarotas, the Tri-Compacts, anything. I honestly think that some of their designs are amongst the prettiest I've ever seen in my life, albeit they don't particularly fit the narrative of being budget-friendly. Omegas do, though, and there are plenty more to choose from. Vintage flagships from Longines, some old Tissot models. And don't get me started on some vintage German brands. There's a whole different wormhole to explore. Based on your location, the prices for watches and most importantly, the availability can vary. Here in the Czech Republic, I can find a lot of Czech and Soviet watches up for grabs. And quite honestly, they're really good. Even if they're mechanical, they're incredibly sturdy and still serve pretty well, even without a proper service. And that brings me to a very important point. Getting a vintage quartz watch is one thing, but getting a vintage mechanical is a whole different story. We did a whole video on the vintage versus mechanical, so please go check that one out if you're interested. But the point being is that mechanical watches tend to need servicing more often than you'd like. And that alone can set you back as much as £1,000 new watch. It's the same problem that you have with cars. There's an issue of parts, finding a good service, the whole lot of it, even though usually watches are somewhat serviced when you buy them from a shop, they don't necessarily work or need more work to be put into them so that it runs properly. That's when things get messy. You can end up paying a lot just to get the watch running, and it may stop again at any moment. Now, if you're okay with taking care of that watch and fixing it, that's a whole different story. There's some incredible pieces that are worth repairing and bringing them back to life, even if it will set you back to that £1,000 mark. From Sport 2, Omegas, I mentioned earlier, or Universal Genève again, the Longines, the Tissots. Hell, one of the most spectacular watches I've seen in my entire life is Adrian Barker's Rolex, the Turnograph reference number 6309. In my eyes, it's definitely a watch worth restoring. And I think the point I'm trying to make is vintage watches are a massive hit and miss. Quartz vintage is a fantastic addition to anyone's collection. Hell, I can even make an example myself, if I find it. This spectacular vintage Omega has been part of my collection for quite a while right now, and I can't help but cherish that watch to the genuine bottom of my heart. This is an incredible timepiece, and you may notice this is quartz, and the price for it, I believe, was around £300. Came with the original band and the buckle. No pun intended. You can look into the brands like Omega, like Tag, like Tissot, like Longines, Orient, and find anything that will speak to you. However, getting a mechanical one does come with the potential of creating a major spin of problems so that the watch actually ticks. But whether it's worth it, it's really up to you. Do you have a vintage watch? What's your favorite? Please tell us in the comments. Cheers.